So, welcome everybody to the Atomley Podcast. This is episode number 2. Today, we're joined by Scott Cowley, who is the head of sales at Custify and also a very good sales coach and trainer that I've worked with a lot over the last couple of years. So, hi, Scott. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Tom. Really excited to be here. Hey, everyone who's watching and or listening.
Indeed. So, Scott, you are, as I said, a very good sales coach, sales trainer. You've also recently started a new job. Well, it's not so new anymore at Custify. Can you tell us a little bit around you, your experiences, what you're doing at Custify, what you're responsible for, etc., etc.?
Yeah, sure. So my background is sales, although I'm actually trained as an accountant because that's all good salespeople are. And yes, I ran a sales consulting training business community coaching thing for probably about 4 years. It's actually quite a while. And then one of my clients gave me an offer too good to refuse, so I ended up joining Custify. Coming up to, it's been almost a year. It's not quite a year, but it's been almost a year. My responsibilities there are basically founder-led sales has kind of been the name of the game up until now, which is pretty common in the startup world that I've operated in. And my remit is to come in and basically turn off founder-led sales and turn into an actual sales org. And everything from getting the information out of the founder's head all the way through actually closing deals and then hiring a team and building out from there. But yeah, it's a go to woe kind of soup to nuts. Every sales rep is in charge of their entire pipeline. And once it closes, we're a customer success software, so the customer success team takes over. And we try and emulate what the best practices are for customer success from there. But as far as sales, it's really, there's 3 of us right now in the sales org. There might be 4 by the end of the year. It's not very big, but we're growing slowly and really going from 100% founder-led revenue contribution to slowly it'll turn into probably 0% from the founder. And that's the plan at least.
And I know the founder well as well because we all met through your mastermind group that you were talking about a second ago. And I know that Philip, the founder, is very good at what he does. But generally speaking, because I know that you've done a lot of this, moving from founder-led sales towards putting in an infrastructure for sales. What would you say are the sort of general roadblocks that founder-led sales contains as part of that journey of moving from one to the other? What do you need to get over in order to make that more successful organization?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question because it's something that every founder has to do. At some point, if you want to grow the business, the founder has to stop selling. But also pretty much every startup that does actually require a sales org and does require a sales conversation, the founder starts doing it, or one of the co-founders starts doing it. So probably the biggest pitfalls I've seen are basically moving too slowly. So having the founder lead it for too long, but then moving too quickly, and the founder, because most of the time in this situation, if the founder doesn't know what they're doing, as in has never built a sales organization, is not a salesperson, they don't actually know how to do that step. They want to run from the sales as soon as they can because sales is hard. Sales is people telling you no a lot all day. That's the crux of it. If you can't get used to the no's, don't become a salesperson. So what founders want to do, and I've seen this happened at Custify, we've reversed it, but I've seen this time and time again. The founder wants to get out of the sales as quickly as they can, and that they just need to go a little bit slower. To give you some examples, Philip, the founder of Custify, stopped selling, and we had a significant downturn in revenue contribution. And then almost the moment he started selling again, because of the collateral we put in place, because of everything we built at the same time, when he was able to close without all of that, his close rate, and we've moved up the value chain and a bunch of cool things have happened. But that running away from it too quickly. And I think the other side of it as well is a lot of founders who aren't salespeople rely on being cheap and discounting. Which is okay. Like, don't get me wrong. When you're starting out, when your product isn't really very formulated, it's very easy to win the market by being cheap. But unfortunately, when you're cheap, you actually get excluded from a lot of deals, which you don't realize. So that's another thing that I've seen a lot of people when they move away from founder-led sales. One of the first things they need to do, or maybe not the first, but maybe within the top 5 things, increase your prices, because you've gone from one person who is pretty much the only one who can do this, and they can get away with a lot lower revenue, to all of a sudden you've got 2 or 3 or 5 sales reps. You need to move up the value chain, because you're a sales rep reaching out. You do not have the credibility of a CEO or a founder to begin with. So if you have a very cheap product, you get excluded from a lot of deals. So we're seeing our average revenue per sale really kind of creep up and up and up and up. Don't get me wrong, we still discount more than I would like, but we're discounting from a significantly higher base, which means pretty much everyone we're adding today is double what we were adding in the past. So we're having a few people churn off from those older prices, because we're saying, hey, you got to start paying what it's worth. But honestly, it's our revenue's still going up in a healthy way, because we raised our prices. Obviously, that's just 2 of the things, and yeah, there's a lot more.
Yeah. Well, obviously, building a commercial organization, let alone just sales, but also marketing. Obviously, guys at Custify are great at CS, because that's the whole point of what you guys do.
We should be. You'd think we're good at it. Maybe if anyone here wants to find out, has a customer success team, Custify.com, Custify.com. That's my shameless plug. The
shameless plug.
Custify.com, everyone.
Get it in early before they switch off. So I know through our conversations that a great quote unquote problem that you guys have at Custify is a high volume of inbound leads, right? And that was consistent from before you came in and started to build the organization to where it is now as well. One of the things that we talk about a lot is qualification, and the need for good sales and marketing alignment around the definitions and KPIs and measurements of qualified leads in various different stages. So as someone that has a lot of inbound leads to deal with, or their team has a lot of inbound leads to deal with, can you tell us a little bit about why qualification is so important to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff within such a large, potentially top of funnel group of leads?
Yeah, sure. So to put this in perspective, we have probably close to 20, 30, sometimes some months 40 inbound leads per rep, which is huge, which is amazing, and it's a testament to the marketing organization that was built before I joined. So those numbers, like, that's a pretty significant pool, because I can tell you, when I was selling my own stuff and doing my own business, I would have maybe 20 sales conversations a month, and it would be mostly outbound. But there is a giant difference in quality. And it comes down to a podcast I listened to years and years and years ago, where there's a woman, and I wish I remembered her name. And she said, inbound, you get what you get. Outbound, you get what you go after. So if you have a high value, like couple of grand a month offering that does actually require a real budget, and it's not really someone can just sign off on it on a whim, you're eventually going to have to go outbound. And at which point you're qualifying like before you even speak to them. You're only reaching out to people who are interesting to you. But then inbound, you just get a lot of people. And you can easily say that kind of 60 to 80% are going to be crap. Just straight away, you know that for a fact. But this is where people really struggle. Your job is not to sell them in the beginning. Your job is to find out, do they have the pain points you can solve? Do they want to solve them? And not the person you're talking to. Does the organization want to solve them? I'll give you an example. There was 2 CSMs reached out from a company that it's not a good fit. And I got on the phone with them and I said, okay, cool. So when you are speaking, like when you went internally and said, we want to go look for this product, what did they say? And their response was, well, we haven't even raised this internally. Okay, cool. So So what that would mean is I now have to not only convince them it's the right tool, I have to then teach them how to convince their manager, who is also not a decision maker, to convince someone in the decision-making organization. That's really hard. That's a lot of effort. Sometimes it's worth it. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes it is worth it, but that's where qualification comes in. You have to decide realistically, at an absolute minimum, in my world, it's a discovery call, half an hour. Anyone gets that. I'm not going to qualify anyone out before that. Fine. Everyone gets that. That's okay. That's not true, actually. I qualify out Gmails and Hotmails and Outlooks, unless they give me a real business address. But almost anyone gets that. But then to actually get, the next step would be an hour conversation. Realistically, I know there's also going to be another hour conversation, either with the leaders or with someone in the tech organization. Plus, I know I'm probably going to have to chase this person 3 or 4 times. And I know realistically, off the back of that first call, I'm also going to have to spend about an hour crafting an email response to what they said. Am I willing to invest? And this is the question you need to ask yourself. Am I willing to invest? That's about 5 hours worth of work. Is this person worth 5 hours? That's the real question I always have when it's qualification. Is this person worth 5 hours? Can I actually see this going somewhere? If I can't, you can't just say no, because people don't respond well to no. You have to have a path they can go down. Don't get me wrong, a sales coach that I worked with and I like a lot, he does just say no, but he does it in a very, very specific, systemic, structured way. The people I've trained who haven't spent years and years doing sales, what I train people to do is have some sort of recorded content. Maybe it's a demo, maybe it's a presentation, maybe it's I don't know what, that have some sort of recorded content that you can send over. Then now they have to invest the hour first. So you're getting like buy-in, like really what's happening. And if it's a real buyer with a real problem and you've disqualified them because you're like, hey, this is not worth it, they're going to watch that hour and they're going to come back to you with actual questions. Maybe you put 15 minutes in the calendar to have for follow-up questions anyway. But if they're a real buyer, they'll invest an hour on their side. If they're not, they won't watch it. And it's very, very easy to what you can do from a qualification is have, at the end of the day, you have to have your rules. Does this person have the pains I can solve? Does the organization want to solve those pains? If they do, how would they go about making a purchase? Is budget already allocated? Do we need to build a business case? Is this something that's going to take 6 months because it's January and their budget cycles are in June and December? Like, you need to understand that. And of all of that, the number one thing that comes out of it is this person worth my time? That's at the end of the day what it's about. If they are, great, keep going. Don't disqualify it at that stage. If they are not worth your time, in your opinion, send them down a path where they have to invest. And if they do invest, they jump over those hurdles, great. Let them come back to you. Work with them. But disqualification I actually don't call it qualification. I call it disqualification. Because really it's, are you worth my time? It's not me trying to qualify to sell to you. No. In this example, let's go to the customer success example. I don't have a customer success problem. I don't have, some people come to me and they've had like 6, 10, 12% churn last month. And in the world I operate in, that is a dead business walking. Doesn't matter how much money they've got. So I don't have 12% churn. I don't have a problem right now. You're the one with the problem. So you have to earn my time. And from there, that doesn't just happen once. It happens the whole way through. So if you have let's say your next conversation, everyone moves to a trial account. That's just the way it's done. Everyone in this industry, that's fine. You don't want to challenge it. You want to go with the status quo. That's okay. You move to that trial account. But then who qualifies for a trial? What criteria do you have around that? And if they say, I just want it, and you go, okay, the way that the rules for the trial is you need to bring 4 people from your organization, 1 leader, 1 champion, and 2 users. And they say, well, I don't have anyone to do, like, there's no one in my organization. Oh, okay. So you work for a 300-person organization and you can't get 3 other people involved. No, I can't. Okay, well, look, let's shelve this for now until the organization's in a position where it wants to move forward, because those are the rules. That's disqualification as well. So you have to know what your structure is. By the way, this is really hard when you're the first sales rep in, or maybe the second sales rep in, and there's no process and there's no structure. And it's all been done in their head. Like, this stuff takes years to really bed out, and that's why, like, this is slow. This is not easy stuff to do, but it is simple. Like the best things.
I was going to ask, actually. So on that topic, how, as the first sort of commercial rep in the business, going from founder-led sales to a more structured organization, how do you set those initial rules for qualification or disqualification? Is it a trial and error process where you say, well, in the past, if we analyze our recent book of business over the last year, if you have one at all, if you're starting out, then you won't even have that, but we found that following this particular path got a better success rate than the other path. But what are the sort of stage gates that you would go through at a very basic level to set those ground rules in place and then iterate on those over time to find a better process?
Yeah. So I think you're going to hate my answer, and anyone listening is also going to probably hate my answer here, because you don't actually do that first. That's about step 3. Step 1 is find how are you getting leads? Where are they coming from? What does it take to get people on the phone or in front of them or on a Zoom, whatever it is that you're selling? That's step 1. That comes before anything. You have to have people to talk to before you can do anything else. Step 2, what does it take for them to buy? What are they actually buying? This is what I call, and a good test for that is like the Sunday night test. Because nobody wakes up and is like, oh my God, I don't have a database of my contacts. They do wake up and they go, or they might lie awake at night thinking, have I followed up with everyone I was supposed to last week? What if someone fell through the cracks? What I just described to you there is a CRM, fundamentally. But nobody cares about a database of their content. It's just no one cares. So you have to work out, not like, what are you selling? You have to work out, what are they buying? That's what the Sunday night test is good for. And there's a whole bunch of cool frameworks, but we don't have time to go into today. But that's kind of step 2, work out what they're buying. You kind of have to do step 1 and 2 at the same time, because you can't get a lot of good quality leads if you don't know what they're actually buying. And I can almost guarantee, if you're a founder listening to this, it's not what you think. It's really not what you think. Nobody cares about your widget. Nobody cares about your baby. In the same way that everyone sees a photo of like their friend's kid who's like a month old and is like, yeah, it's a baby, fine. Like, everyone's baby is ugly to everyone else. But to you, it's the most beautiful thing in the world. But no one is buying your baby because of what it does. They're buying it for their own reasons. So you have to work out what that is. Then step 3 is to start thinking about, what are those gates? It's different for every business. It's not really. It kind of is. People pay me to say it's different for every business. Fundamentally, it's you need a conversion event of some kind. Fundamentally, it's you need to generate a lead of some kind. And then there's a bunch of stuff in the middle. But it is different in execution, but core, it's about the same for most businesses. And then that's when the real skill starts to come in. Are you talking to the right person? Does this person actually want to solve the pain they tell you they want to solve? And that's hard. That's, again, going back to the disqualification question. Because if you walked into a room of, let's say you walk into like a high school, and you go into like the sports team, and you say, who here wants to be a professional, whatever, sports person? Pick the thing. They're all going to put their hand up. Who here wants to do that? Yeah, everyone does. But then if you really boil it down, who's willing to do the work it takes? Who's willing to sacrifice everything else? Who's willing to do, let's go basketball. Who's willing to sink 50 shots after everyone's gone home? Not put 50 shots up, sink them. Actually score 50 times in the basket from the free throw line while everyone else has gone home, because that's what it takes. All of a sudden, there might only be 1 or 2 hands up. So you have to take that mentality in to your conversations. Who is willing to put in the effort to actually buy what you're selling or be able to deliver what you're selling. So you have to work out what are those 50 shots? What are the things they need to do? And that's how you get to the gates that you have to build.
Got you. I've heard you give that analogy in a couple of different formats before, but I love the the sports team analogy. Love that. It's good. So you were talking about you generate the lead, you do the conversion event, then you follow through the qualification and disqualification process. So obviously in our world, the webinar is the funnel through which, or the container through which this whole lead generation and conversion actually happens. So I know that you've used webinars or you've used video content or content marketing in general, obviously, to do marketing for your own businesses before. A webinar itself, the actual running of a webinar, where do you see that in the funnel? Because obviously we have quite a clear view that there's a lot of work that goes on before. The delivery itself is critical, but then there's a hell of a lot of work that goes on afterwards to actually turn that into a lead and push that down and make that conversion event worthwhile for yourself and for your prospect. So can you sort of explain in your mind, how does a webinar fit into this sort of structure of lead gen, conversion, sales process?
Yeah,
and
for sure.
How would you optimize that to make sure that you're running through it from top to bottom in the most efficient way possible?
So I love webinars because a webinar is effectively, it is that conversion event. So conversion event to me is it's got to be something that people have to do, but it's also got to be limited in some capacity. So a conversion event could be an in-person sales meeting. A conversion event could be, and how many times have you seen this on the TV or on the radio or whatever, that the local Chevy dealer or the local Chrysler dealer is having its end of financial year sale or whatever, Halloween, there's always an excuse to have a sale. That's a conversion event as well. It's like a timed structure. And what a webinar does that's better than most other conversion events is it can be a one-to-many style. So I love webinars because I'm fundamentally a sales guy who's used to one-to-one. If I can put any leverage in that of 1 to 2, 1 to 10, 1 to 50, I love that. That's what I love doing because it means I'm also fundamentally lazy. If I can get 50 people that are really interested in buying, and then I only have to talk to them when they actually know that they want to buy already, great. That's even better. So this is where I think webinars actually have two natural places. And the first one is absolute top of the funnel. Someone's never heard of you before, don't know who you are, don't know what you're talking about. And that's one type of webinar. And I think that's the webinars that you're currently running at the moment, Tom. And those are phenomenal because once you've got a list of people who know you, trust you, have seen you before, like everything in business gets easier. That first, getting that list, there's people who know you and trust you, that's super hard. So if you can do that leveraged at scale, which is what a webinar effectively is, but it's gated and it's timed. They have to turn up on that day or watch the recording over the next few days. They can't wait until next year. This is not an on-demand thing that in 6 months' time it'll still be there. If they want to ask a Q&A or if they want to be involved, they have to be there at the time, which is amazing. The other place that webinars fit in is much, much, much lower in the funnel when you need to keep those touch points open and they could turn into a conversion event for an actual purchase. So we have what we call a group demo webinar, which we run once a month, once every 2 weeks, pretty much whenever we get around to it, if I'm honest. And we use that when someone needs a refresher. And we use the recordings, but it's very different to an awareness level piece of content. Very, very different. But the other thing to remember is one of the hardest things to do in any given business, and this doesn't matter what scale you're operating at, but one of the hardest things to do is focus. Like I want to do webinars and I want to do white papers and I want to do SEO, and I want to do outbound emails, and I want to do no, don't do that. If my world, and the caveat on this is my world is founder-led organizations, and I come in and I build out a sales org, and then the founder stops selling, and we've got a couple of sales reps. So I'm not talking about the 100-person company that's got 10 in the sales team, and they've been doing this a bunch of times before. They can do 4 or 5 different things. I'm talking about when you've got 2 or 3 in like the revenue generation team. You've got a marketing person, you've maybe got a head of sales, you've got a founder. So it's a pretty small organization. Maybe the 3 are a bit different, but it's a small organization. You can only do one thing. So pick one. And if it's going to be webinars, it's great. But as Tom was saying, there's a lot of work that goes in at the front. There's a lot of work that goes in at the back. So you need to pick one, and you need to focus on what that one is. If it's webinars, webinars work. I know that everyone keeps talking about the death of webinars, but they've also been talking about the death of cold calling for as long as I've been around. And I've cold called a lot of businesses and produced a lot of sales because of it. Webinars aren't going anywhere. They aren't going anywhere anytime soon. And they're a phenomenal tool, especially that awareness level. Yeah, they're awesome. I love them.
Yeah, 100%. People that say that that webinars are dead, in my opinion, they're looking at it from the wrong perspective. The modern way to look, or the right perspective to take on webinars nowadays, is just like any other form of marketing. You need to iterate on what has worked in the past in order to find the new best practice way of doing things. And we talked about in the webinars that we've run recently and other mediums, marketing mediums that we use. We talk a lot about the fact that in order to iterate and to move forward with the marketing that you're doing, you need to find different formats. You need to find different delivery methods. You need to find the optimal time period that you're going to run a webinar over. And so we end up talking about the fact that there's probably a dozen different webinar types, and maybe the word webinar is actually a bit reductive. Maybe it's virtual events, and actually there's a dozen different ways that you could run these, from round tables with 10, 12 people attending to mass attendance 1 to 100, what you were talking about, top of funnel stuff. There's so many different ways of doing it, and you just have to keep iterating until you find the right way. And obviously you guys are doing your group demos. That works really well for you. You may do some other, periodically, or do some other type of webinar in between, and then you'll be doing your more general content marketing. But like you say, picking one piece of pillar content, and then building your satellite, what we call satellite content around that, and being quite specific about choosing that funnel because you know that it works for your audience and your organization, and the way that you sell and market is super important. So I'm glad that you agree that webinars are a good way to do that.
We also, Tom, sorry to interrupt, we also actually do run awareness level webinars as well. We run them at least once a month, and they're usually with a partner. So we're leveraging our email list, their email list, their promotion. So you're kind of doing partner level awareness, and we get a good couple of hundred to those, or at least a couple of hundred signups. And then we market to them and retarget and all the other stuff. But yeah, if you're able to get even 10 people to a webinar once a week or once a month, 10 more people you're talking to that you weren't talking to before. If you can get even one really qualified buyer to a webinar once a week, that's 52 buyers a year. Most businesses that I work with, if they closed 52 buyers a year, that's a good year. That's actually a good year. When I was running my business previously, I couldn't deliver for 52 people a year. I'd tap out at probably maybe 20, 25, unless I completely changed my business. To be fair, that's one of the reasons I stopped running it, because it didn't have enough leverage. But that's where, if you can get webinars compound massively, and people think they need to get big numbers. You don't. You really don't. You will eventually, if you do it for a year, you do it once a week, and you've got a different partner every week, and you use it. That's the one thing you do. Or maybe you do it once a month, because there's a lot of work that goes into those awareness level. And let's say your goal is you need at least 4 people on there.
Yeah.
That's not hard. 4.3 because of the way weeks work, but that's not impossible. And once you, as you were saying, once you do start structuring it and rolling it out over time, you will improve naturally. It's inevitable. And all of the different ways that you try and fill that webinar, because a webinar is not just, hey, we're doing this event and you create a landing page and then you don't do anything. You're going to be doing emails, or you're going to be doing LinkedIn posts, you're going to be doing cold calls, you're going to hire an agency to do outbound dials to get people to the webinar. You're probably not going to do that, but I know people who have, and it works.
Yeah, it works.
So you're going to do marketing around it. You're going to get better at that marketing, and those 4.3 that you're getting at the beginning, they're quickly going to turn into 8 to 16 because you start working out what works. And that's why I said before, one thing and focus. We have one main source of traffic that took us about 18 months to build up, but consistently just delivers month in, month out, a bunch of leads. We close some of them, but it's super consistent. It goes up and down with the seasons, but over the course of a year, a couple of hundred leads come through that one source. And that's enough. Realistically, that's actually enough when the founder was just leading the org. That's all we needed. So really find one. And I love webinars, especially if you're in a non-sexy industry or a hyper-competitive industry. Because if you're running a marketing agency, how do you differentiate yourself from everyone else? Well, you've got to do it with authority. You got to do it with the only things you can differentiate yourself. Webinars is a way to build authority really quickly. So yeah, I absolutely love them.
Yeah, I mean that concept of building authority through the one differentiating factor that every single human being has is the fact that every single human being is unique. They have their own character. They have their own way of crossing through the airwaves to whoever's watching it on the other side of the world potentially. And so if you're trying to differentiate yourself, there's a few different things that you can do. You can use you should do in parallel, use your character and the way that you present and the way that you speak to people and engage with people to build a conversation and a community. You can do thought leadership in order to set yourself apart from your competition because you know something that they don't and that you want your audience to know as well. Or you can use things like proprietary data or things that you only have access to as a business, which gives unique insight to your audience. Proprietary data is an amazing thing to do if you've got it available. Obviously, you guys, if you were to aggregate all of your Custify data, there will be some gems in there about.
No, we can't. We've built out our model and intentionally that we can't, and we actually win a fair bit of business because we can't and don't. Proprietary data is awesome though. But the one thing I'll say as well, before we go too far, webinars aren't for everyone. Like if you're selling mostly into the English-speaking world and you have an incredibly thick French accent, for example, like don't do webinars. It's possibly not the fit for you. But if you look half decent on camera, if you can speak, even if you can't, you can try it out and find out. But like, just be okay that it's an experiment. It might not work the first time. It might not work the 15th time. But if you do run it properly as an experiment, eventually you'll crack it. Or it might not be for you. And that's okay. There are other conversion events. Like there's a reason why the local cafe doesn't run webinars because it just doesn't make sense for their business. So be okay that it might not be for you. But at the same time, be okay that it also might be. And it's a great way to build that pillar content you talked about, the snippets afterwards. And it's a great way as well. The one, I think the other caveat I'd probably add on to that is make sure you know what the goal is. So is the goal white paper download? Is the goal sales conversations? Is the goal just building the email list? Like those are three pretty specific goals. I mean, I'm a sales guy, so only one of them is actually a good goal because I don't care how many emails we got. I don't care how many white papers we get downloaded. I only care about sales conversations. But if whatever the goal that you've got, optimize for that, focus on that, Focus on getting that done, and be okay that you might not make as much revenue from that one webinar because you were focused on white paper downloads, but actually you got 17 white paper downloads, which, let's say you had an audience of 23, which is 23 is not a lot of people if you're really thinking about the massive scale and you're kind of comparing yourself to everyone else. But 23 is also, like, there's a cafe around the corner I go to fairly regularly that can't even hold 23 people. So it's actually a pretty significant number of people. And if you can convert them into the made up numbers that are definitely planned ahead and didn't just come up with on the spot, convert that to then 17 downloads. Hey, you're onto something. That's an insane conversion rate. If your white papers can then turn into revenue, great. That's good. But remember what your goal was in this hypothetical example.
Exactly. So obviously the goal, coming back to Atomley and the sort of proposition that we have, the goal for us is to put on webinars and then get the people that attend those webinars to take something interesting away, learn something, be part of the community that you're building as a host, but also to fill in the survey, right? And the survey typically completes at about 70% response rate, which is good, very good. And so, yeah, like you say, 20 people come, you're looking at like 15, something like that. People are going to fill that survey in. And those questions are specifically phrased in a way where you can capture some kind of buying intent or qualification or disqualification data or information from those people. So we had a really good conversation a couple of weeks ago around the questions that are currently in the Atomley survey and how they could potentially be tweaked a little bit to be more suitable for gathering the information that a sales rep is specifically looking to gather. But I was just interested, in your opinion, that format and that process that we use where we get qualification information out of the audience live during the webinar and they can be followed up with literally half an hour later. What do you think about that process? How does that sort of flow into your then follow-on sales conversation as a salesperson? Because a lot of people that we speak to are marketing people, and they don't necessarily know the value that this holds for a salesperson on the other end. That, you know, that when that lead gets thrown over the fence to sales, how valuable is it to have some of like pre-qualification information already to hand that you can go and pick up the phone and do something with straight away?
I will answer your question, but the first thing I'm going to say is, if your goal is to book sales calls, I don't care how many people join your community. I don't care how many people attend the webinar. I don't care how many people fill in the form. I don't care about any of that. You need to be focused. It's not even great. It's irrelevant. You need to be focused on what you actually want to achieve. And if what you want to achieve is sales calls, I think the first thing you have to do is you have to ask. So you have to start, and I get in a lot of trouble for this. As you can tell, I can be direct sometimes, and I do get in trouble for it.
Oh, really?
But you have to start where you want to end. So if your goal is to fill in the surveys and your goal is to then turn those into sales calls, that's a good goal. It's a trackable goal. It's measurable. It's what SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and whatever the T stands for. And exactly as you said there's definitely a conflict that comes up between marketing and salespeople. So you need to, as a marketing person, decide what the goal is, or as a sales team, decide what the goal is and lead with that. I would even open the webinar with, today we're talking about this. Before we go any further, completely shameless plug, at about the 35th minute mark, we're going to ask you to fill in a survey. That survey is then going to be used to potentially market and sell to you. Now, this survey is entirely optional. When we get there, you'll see why you want to fill it in. But I want to preempt you. That's the reason we're doing this today. So thank you so much for joining. 35th minute will be coming up. Let's jump in. And what you're doing there is you're priming people. And you're telling them, I'm going to ask you for this. You will have some people drop off at that point, a very small percentage. But at the same time, I learned this the other day, of the thousands of complaints that the local airport gets near where I am, it's sent by like 10 people. They just really love complaining. So you're always, by being direct and saying this is what I'm going to ask for, you're always going to piss someone off. And that's okay. Do you really want to work with that person who gets annoyed by you saying, I'm going to ask you for something? So that's kind of the first step is know what you're going to ask for. And when you're in a webinar scenario as well, you can be a little bit cheeky about it. So I open every webinar I've ever run for the last 5 years. I always open with, hey, I'm Australian. I'm based in the UK these days, which means, and I'm a sales guy, which means my slides are not going to be the best because I'm not a designer. And sometimes I talk a little bit funny. Is that okay with everyone? Get some responses, and then instantly go into your, and by the way, this is going to be the rules for today. Now, when you get to those questions as a salesperson, I want to know, does this person have the problems that I solve? Do they want to solve them? And who are they in the actual buying decision process? Are they a sales rep who has almost no authority, can't really do anything on their own, probably isn't going to buy this unless it's a $5 a month widget? Fine, that's okay. But then my job once I get on that call is to convince them or get them to convince me that I should talk to their manager or their VP or their owner or whoever it is. That's my job now. So because I'm armed with that information that they have a pain and I know exactly what it is, they want to solve that pain and I know where they fit in the decision-making process. But that example there was obviously a lower value. You wouldn't hit them straight away. Out of the 20 people who join and the 15 who fill in the form, there's probably going to be 2 or 3 owners in there, or 2 or 3 founders, or 2 or 3 CEOs who have told you that they have a pain you solve. They've told you they want to fix it. Now you get on the phone, and the first question I'm going to ask, the first thing that's going to come out of my mouth, well, I have, whenever I do a sales call, it's not the first thing because I have my 5 rules that everyone has to agree to before we continue. But that's a whole nother talk show. The thing that I'm going to ask them is, okay, so you filled this form in. Why now? Why not 6 months ago? Why not next year? We're recording this in summer of 2022. So what I'm saying at the moment is, why not 6 months ago, or why not 2023? Why are we talking now? And they're going to give you a lot of ammunition. Like they're going to just unload on you there. Or they're going to say nothing and they're going to be really reserved. That's okay. Both of those options are possible. But what I want to get to is, why did they fill the form in? Why did they agree, yes, I have this pain point, and yes, I want to solve that problem, and I'm a founder or a CEO, or I am a person, I've done this before. I've bought something in my life. If I'm the CEO of a 50-person business, I've probably bought lots of somethings in my life. Because every one of them needs an office chair, for example. So this is a known buyer. They know you're going to reach out to them afterwards. If they don't, they're not the CEO. They're full of shit. They're lying to you. Sorry, am I allowed to swear on this, Tom? I just realized okay.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Sorry, anyone who got offended. Probably a good qualifier out that if you don't like swearing, I'm not the person for you. But
just tracking the live stat. Half the audience has just dropped off.
And I'm okay with that because that means half the audience don't want to work with me, and that's fine. Because my job is to find out: do you have the pains that I solve? Do you still want to solve them? And who are you in the decision-making process? And if you're the sort of person who's going to be offended by me swearing, we shouldn't work together. Like just straight up, we shouldn't work together. But that's Absolutely. The core of it. Like that's those 3 questions is what I'm really coming back to. And that's where what's going to be thrown over the fence is those 3. And I may not necessarily use that information in the way that it was given. I'm almost certainly not going to open the call with, hey, Tom, you mentioned that these were the pains that you were dealing with, and I'm reading off a script now, and this is what's going on. Because they already know that's their pains. You might reiterate it to them, but you're going to reiterate it throughout the conversation. The real question I want to know is why? Why is this a pain you want to solve? Why now? Why did you even attend this webinar? Because you could have been doing literally anything else in your life. You could have been remodeling the house, spending some time with your partner, your missus, your husband. You could have been playing with the kids, or you could have been sinking tinnies at the pub. Like there's a lot of things you could have been doing, and you chose to invest half an hour, however long your webinar is, on, let's be honest, no one is running really interesting webinars for people who are not feeling pain. We're not kind of building the next gaming solution that's going to revolutionize. None of us are doing that. We're usually dealing with B2B problems that are dry, that nobody actually cares about unless they do. So they decided to invest time with you. You need to find out why. What was that prompt? And if they can't give you one, you haven't built enough trust with them. Or maybe they're an idiot. There are a lot of morons on this planet. There really are. I think the Winston Churchill quote, never underestimate man's ability to be a moron. I don't even think that was quoted by anyone. I think I just made that up then. But yeah, they could be. They genuinely could just be an idiot, which is fine. But if they're not, and we probably should assume they're not, there's a reason they're talking to you.
Exactly. To become a CEO of a 50 or 100 person organization would be difficult to be a moron consistently throughout that entire journey.
Oh, you'd be surprised, Tom. You've seen those people before. You know what it's like.
The other half of the audience has just disappeared because we've offended them there.
So we've got 25% left. Everyone who's left, I'm going to do another shameless plug. Check out my website, thesalesmastermind.com. So there's only 25% of you left. You're the people that I want to talk to. So come say hi or hit me up on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. I was going to get to that bit in a second, but
have I jumped the gun there?
There is actually one other question that I wanted to ask you. Or maybe no, I'll go for one. So I've been asking this to all of our podcast guests, all of our webinar guests. Where do you think the future of virtual events or webinars is going? Where is it heading? And where would you where it's actually going to head, and where you'd like it to head are two fairly different things. So where do you think it's going, and where do you think it should be going in order to become a more effective marketing channel for the type of business that we're in?
Where is it going? I think it's going the way of every other piece of marketing in history. It's right now really cheap and really easy, and over time it'll get more expensive and harder. I don't think that's anything special. I think there's a difference between a webinar and a virtual event. I haven't worked out what the difference is, if I'm honest, but I do think there is a difference.
I use them interchangeably. That's part of the issue. I think that webinar, I think, is synonymous at the moment with being pitched to in a one-to-many format, where a sales rep gets on a webinar, shamelessly pitches their product for 20 minutes, and then does a very scripted Q&A around some questions that are also designed to sell the product to the same audience. My opinion is that we need to move away as an industry from that, what we currently think of and call a webinar, towards something else, which is why I'm thinking about renaming what we do to something else, because of that synonymous nature with that problem. But yeah, I'm interested to see where you want it to go as someone that generates leads from that channel. And I don't know where that's trended for you over the last couple of years, especially since COVID has finished. Like you said at the start, people are saying it's dead. It's not. It just needs a pivot. But what does that pivot need to be in order to continue to deliver consistent results?
I don't even know if it needs a pivot. I think it's just don't be bad. Don't do it badly. It's the same as if you've ever seen the changes in the prices of Google ads or Facebook ads over the years, or you've ever seen the changes in LinkedIn ads. We'll see the same. Right now, TikTok, I think, is very cheap. I logged on once, lost 5 hours of my life. It was 3 a.m. I deleted the app. I'm never logging onto that thing again. but I could see why it's so addictive. And right now it's really cheap because there's not much money flowing into it relative to other mediums. Webinars are exactly the same. They were underutilized and incredibly cheap to do. And cheap doesn't necessarily mean just money. Because you could still bid on really long tail, really specific keywords on Google Ads that get no clicks and it doesn't cost you anything. But it's a waste of time. And time is also valuable. So right now, I think webinars are still pretty cheap in the grand scheme of things. I think virtual events were incredibly cheap over the lockdowns and the COVID period. And a lot of people did them. And I actually worked for a virtual event company during that period. So I remember what that was like, that just lots of money being thrown at it. It was very, very cheap relative to physical events, and it was delivering really good results. But I think where should it go? Oh, I've never thought about that. I honestly don't know. Be better. You just have to be better. In the same way that if you have a Super Bowl ad in the US, it's some of the most expensive 30 seconds you'll ever spend. And if you have a crap ad, you've wasted your money. If you have a great ad, I think Coinbase this year had a really good one, and it was just a blank screen with a QR code bouncing around, which apparently delivered thousands and thousands of signups of people scanning that QR code. So that's an example of just be better. The creative matters. But at the same time, there was also, if that was just, the medium also matters, because if they had display, like Google Display stuff, and they just had a QR code bouncing around without a captured audience, it probably wouldn't deliver very well. So you do have to match. Like, webinars are different. Virtual events are different to your other sorts of marketing. Yes, you just have to be better. It's the same with cold calling. Like, it got really, really easy to buy an auto dialer and just dial like 100 numbers a minute and have some 15-year-old who just dropped out of school reading a script. But nobody buys from that because nobody trusts someone who calls them on the phone. So cold calling has changed, not dead. I can also actually have a very, very specific example of this in the last kind of 12 months. A guy I worked with, as when I was a sales mentee of a sales coach I was working with, there's another guy who was selling in my same program, selling to real estate agents. And this guy has balls. Like, he'll just do whatever it takes to win. And he started walking into real estate agents and just asking for the relevant person. Like an actual cold call, like knocking on the door saying, "Who is this?" So, and he had really good success. He had insane conversion rates, insane sign-up rates to the kind of the marketplace service thing he was selling. So, like, walking into places is not dead. And this was it, like the height of COVID, or at least the height of the recovery, when people were still wearing masks inside. So,
and that's been around for literally tens of thousands of years.
But if that doesn't prove that webinars are not going to die, you just have to get better at it. No medium ever dies. People still make a lot of money from Google Ads. Like, people still make a lot of money from Facebook.
Just needs to be well optimized.
But they're way more expensive now. Like, it's just a much more expensive channel. Webinars are still in that cheap phase, I think. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I agree. I think that plays really nicely into like the narrative that we've had recently, which is, in a lot of ways, it doesn't really matter which webinar streaming platform you use or which configuration of the actual streaming platform that you use. If you choose one particular platform, there's many different ways that you can configure that platform to have breakout rooms, not have breakout rooms, have polls on, comments on or off, whatever it is. A lot of that doesn't actually matter. Just pick one, get good at it, keep doing it. Like you said earlier, compound the effect over time. There was an interesting thing that you said around inbound, you get what you get, outbound, you get what you go after. Completely agree with that. And there's a whole other conversation in like when you're doing inbound and outbound in parallel, what different levels of qualification or disqualifications you need to apply to each of those proportionally, so that you get what you want out of it as well. But just keep doing it, compound it, get better at it. There's no right or wrong answer to what constitutes getting better, like, because like we said earlier, everyone's unique. So the way that I would get better at doing it would be completely different to the way that you get better at doing it, and you just find your niche corner of that market, and you dominate the corner that you're good at. And I think, the thought leadership stuff, just keep learning, keep being educational in the way that you talk to people, keep building communities and bringing people together and being the central pivotal point of a conversation that's going on. And eventually people will come to you just as much as you need to go to them in the early days to bring them into that ecosystem. So completely agree, man. Completely agree with that. I like the way that you always make me smile in the way that you simplify things, and it is just get better, get good, as the kids would say. But it's true. Okay, well, we've been running for a lot longer than planned. Thanks for your time and your wisdom, as always. Last question: how can people find? Well, actually, you've already shamelessly plugged twice, but is there a third
yes?
way
But
that
remember,
people can
Tom, what
contact you?
my piece of advice was, which was preempt what you're going to say. So anyone who didn't write it down, I hope in the last few minutes has got their pen and paper out. thesalesmastermind.com. Go check it out. You can sign up for an email list that has a great like sign up bonus. I might start sending emails on that again soon. I haven't sent one in a while, but the sign up bonus is awesome, especially if you're a founder leading a sales org. You're not. So my old tagline used to be, I worked with founders who sell that aren't salespeople. So if you fall in that category, thesalesmastermind.com. You can also Google it, The Sales Mastermind. It should pop up. My LinkedIn profile should pop up as well. If you search for my name, though, you'll get this professor of SEO based in the US who just got tenure. Why does a professor of SEO need tenure? Why is there a professor of SEO to begin with?
Was it tenure at Google by any chance? Or
No, he's at a university. He's a teacher. He teaches. He's a professor of SEO. Like, what? That's not a thing. But apparently it is, because the American system has to have more bureaucrats and more anyone who's a professor listening of something pointless. Obviously, you're excluded. Your pointless thing is not as bad as this guy's. But Google.
They all dropped off. They all dropped off half an hour ago, so it's fine.
I'm not going to name those professions that I consider pointless, because that would be poor form. And I've only got 25% of the audience left, as we said. So to the one person listening, The Sales Mastermind, or hit me up on LinkedIn. Google that, and I'll probably appear. I think I appear. I appear for myself when I Google it. So The Sales Mastermind.
I mean, I asked this question, and inevitably I'm just going to put the links in the description below the podcast. So if you've made it this far, you probably also would have seen the link right underneath what you've just been watching for the last 45 minutes. So probably an irrelevant question. But hey, if you made it this far, that was a fun ending to a podcast. Thank you very much, Scott. Really appreciate it. We'll have you back on at some point to talk closing and more specifically the salesy side of things. But it's been great to understand your qualification methods and what you consider to be good marketing qualification and how to go through that process with a webinar. So thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again soon.
Been fun, Tom. Bye, everybody.
And I will do one last plug. If you want help with putting on a webinar, running a webinar,
go to thesalesmastermind.com. That's the plug you're about to do, right, Tom?
Well, actually, yes, you could, because Scott is also very good at this. But what I would hope he would do is refer you then back to atomley.com/fusion if you want a managed service, or just atomley.com if you want to see all of our content and you want to have a look at the survey software that we offer. So yeah, if you need help with webinars in general or building a marketing strategy around webinars, come and talk to us. Drop me a direct message on LinkedIn or an email, tom@atomley.com, and we'd be happy to help. All right, thanks everyone for watching, listening, and we'll see you next time.